I'm here with Carol von Strum and Susan Swift. Carol von Strum has written a book about the experiences in the Five Rivers Valley in the late 70s called A Poisoned Fog.
A bitter fog.
A bitter fog, called A Bitter Fog. So tell us events in the Five Rivers Valley back in the 70s that started all of this.
Well, what started it was not just our farm, but for me, it was our farm getting sprayed first by a county road crew that went right through our property, spraying the roadside, and then the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, spraying the ridges around our place with helicopters. They were both using the ingredients of Agent Orange, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. And the effects on our children, our animals, and our gardens were just dramatic. It was, everything got sick.
Well, the effects on the servicemen who were exposed to it during the Vietnam War were quite profound too.
Very much so. So we were seeing, well, our children got very sick. You know, they were vomiting, bloody, whatever.
Oh my God.
And within the next few weeks, we had animals, particularly the poultry, the ducks and chickens were hatching, their eggs hatched with chicks and ducklings and geese with their feet on backwards and their beaks crossed. And
wow.
We had never seen anything like that before, ever. This was in 1975.
So the reason that they were using this spray in the first place, I think, was because they were clear cutting, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in order to give the new seedlings that they wanted to plant a chance to thrive, they sprayed this stuff to kill all the other plants in the area.
That's right. I mean, that's not the only thing they were using it for. They were also using it on their roadside, right, which the Forest Service had been doing. Their impact statements for the 2 or 3 years before we filed this lawsuit were, I don't know, maybe 40 pages, and they were just maps showing where they were going to spray. They didn't bother to include anything.
They didn't look at any kind of studies to see what any effects might be.
That's right. And after, because what the judge held was, no, you have to stop. You cannot use this stuff until you include scientific evidence of what it could do and what it has done in other places, including Vietnam.
And how did they respond to that then?
Well, they produced a 2-volume environmental impact statement that weighed about 30 pounds. Each volume was this, 1.5, 2 inches thick, and included not only what had happened in Vietnam, but they had to include the studies we had found and testimony that we had been able to bring into court about what was happening, because it turned out USDA was actually testing like cattle being raised on rangeland, sprayed with the same stuff. Mm-hmm. And they had done their own studies and found dioxin 2,4-D, which is the most toxic chemical ever synthesized by human beings. And found dioxin 2,4-D, which is the most toxic chemical ever synthesized by human beings. They did do some tests, but they would do tests on multiple chemicals with the same animals, so I mean, how can you tell, right? And then they would falsify the results anyway. And so those were called magic pencil studies, because they basically never did the actual studies. And it was on the basis of those fraudulent or non-existent studies that the government, the EPA, approved these chemicals for use in our forests and our roadsides and everywhere else, for that matter. And so that's what the book is mostly about, is the fact that they would rely on non-existent or fraudulent data to say it's safe, and they would totally discount what they called anecdotal information from people like us who said, hey, our horses died, or hey, all my ducklings have their feet on backwards. They said, oh, well, that's not scientific. Those were called magic pencil studies. And they would totally discount what they called anecdotal information from people like us who said, hey, our horses died, or hey, all my ducklings have their feet on backwards. They said, oh, well, that's not scientific. Those were called magic pencil studies. All my ducklings have their feet on backwards. They said, oh, well, that's not scientific. Those were called magic pencil studies.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm claiming fair use. That's the bulk of the clips I'm going to be playing, but there will be a couple more upcoming. And the importance of these clips were that this is how our system operates. Now, God bless these people. They have fought tooth and nail to try to right the wrongs of the devil himself, to kill, steal, and destroy. And they did a number in this part of the world, but I very much admire how they have fought back against the evil of this system. And yes, I met these people actually. I don't want this story to be about me, but I did take a direct hit. They probably don't remember me, but I remember them. Carol on the right, lived a educated, upper class life out east somewhere and wanted a more agrarian lifestyle, which I could completely appreciate. Brilliant mind. And when I met them, I was in my early 20s, and Susan on the left was about 30-ish, and Carol on the right was about 40. And this has been 40 years ago that I met them. I admire their hard work, but I'm doing this as a demonstration of just how fine-tuned this system has become. Now, I can't completely cover everything, but I want to cover a couple of high points. I've kind of have to step away from all this and kind of meditate upon something that my daughter-in-law had stated about that we are the slaves under the pharaohs. And I really took it quite seriously, and I'll get into the scriptural aspect before this is all over. But I wanted to demonstrate these, people have fought back with all their might, and and there's more videos available on this whole topic, but Carol had helped, and even in the 2010s, these people in Gold Beach, Oregon, and it's just such an uphill battle. But let me get into a little bit how they operate. Now, Carol spoke of this product on the right bottom, and which included this 2,4,5-T and 2,4-D. That makes up that orange product. But this is what is dumped on us everywhere, every day of our lives, especially the one on the right. Now, it really literally sucked the air out of my lungs. Occasionally, I'd take my dog for a walk at the city park and a beautiful lawn. Well, let a beautiful lawn be a warning to you, because one day I saw a tractor pulling a tanker load of something. So I went to their office to inquire what they were putting on this beautiful park where our children play, and this is it. And that was in at least 2000, and I've seen people really muck up on that product on the right. It's like free reign. And we know about the seeds and all of that. I don't need to elaborate that much on the product itself. You know, it's poison from the pit of hell. Um, but what I do want to talk about, what I learned at my tender young age in my 20s about how this system operates. It's a revolving door. Leadership in those upper companies will take leadership in what is supposed to be protecting us. Okay? It's completely insidious scam, and it's not just these type industries, because we have this guy that was behind a disease named after him, and he got this product on the market, and you could see that it's a straight up toxin. I don't know another word for it. And how did his life work? Well, he went from these different industries into the government, into this other industry on the bottom left. I feel like I have to edit my speech. And then he ends up in this high position, that was under Bush, and them going to the Persia, not Persia, but that part of the world east of the Mediterranean. And maybe and it's so much in our face. Talk about a marriage made in hell. It was when these two companies joined forces. They're like on opposite ends of the spectrum. Now I am going somewhere with this, and and it's just like they've been at this a long time. They perfected their schemes, and it's just very difficult to cope with. And my point being of this video is that we do need to depend on the Lord. He does not at all like what's going on at all. Now, I've talked before about the body of Christ. We each have our own function in this. So, it's not like I feel as though the good Lord would want me to throw in the towel. Now, as I say, I did take a direct hit in my early 20s, so I thank God I survived that, as Susan and Carol did, but not everybody did. And if they happen to stumble across my video, I do know, I knew Lee, who had unusual metastatic lung cancer that went to his brain. I wasn't there, but I knew about Melise passing away. I heard about the Gilberts passing away. And it's so sad and tragic. And if that isn't enough, Carol lost her 3 children. And this is before I met her. She lost her 3 children under very suspicious circumstances. And, so God love you guys. You've been through hell and back. Now, I want to mention, if that's not enough, but, I want to flash back. This was all in the late 80s. And, no, I'm saying that wrong. The late 70s and, maybe into the early 80s. Now, other than the whole Vietnam thing, there was, this was really the first government conspiracy, if you will, that I ever heard of, was this contraption, the microwave oven. People were very suspicious of it. Honest to God. I mean that was the first quote conspiracy I know of, and I will get more into that here in a little bit because I think we're living straight up in open microwave.
The Mayo brothers believed that politics was to stay out of Mayo Clinic. We were always told to remain neutral.
I'm obviously switching gears in a big way, and I'll give you a second to read about this gal. And suffice to say, I've had a real love-hate relationship with the whole industrial complex that this has become. I grew up in Rochester and actually worked for this outfit, Mayo Clinic, for about 5 years, and I kind of walked away with opportunity because they'd put you through college, stuff like that. One of my coworkers, I did clerical work, a short duration of education, and but one of my coworkers went on to get her RN, and the last I heard, she was a emergency helicopter flight nurse. So the opportunities were there. I really enjoy the science of it all. The whole medical thing, I would just dive in and read literature like crazy. And Mayo really tried to stay out of the fray, stay non-political, except now, the tables have turned. They sold themselves out. Period. End of story. And I've been keeping an eye on things. At the start of this, I had seen a presentation by some neurosurgeons that showed some integrity, and I've kind of kept tabs on them. And they're push, push, push the agenda all along. So this comes as no shock. Mayo, now, growing up in Rochester was kind of a blue collar, white collar kind of town. There were rich, but not the mega rich, but they served the mega rich. For example, when I was in high school, the Shah of Iran came to town and they reserved an entire floor of this building for his care. They've grown like crazy. There's the front entrance. And, I'm going to speak briefly about my love-hate relationship. Now, I could smell a rat when I worked there, so I never really felt led to get into a medical field. I had no taste for like nursing or any of that. I really didn't. Maybe like Carol, I wanted a more rural life, and that's how I ended up in Arizona. Enough said on that. But I'll tell you a couple things that really stood out to me. Now, when I worked there, we'll say about, I'm in a ballpark figure at 85, 86 that this was going on. Mayo really had their fingers in the DRGs. They would go around the units with their clipboards and they were gathering data for the DRGs, which stands for Diagnostic Related Groups. So they played a key role in the ICD, I think they're ICD-10s now. But this was the introduction of the whole AI algorithm. Like you have to put in the diagnostic codes and you get kicked out of the hospital after so many days, essentially what they're allowed from what they gathered from their clipboard. And that, that is blossoming in a very big way anymore. Another thing that, that applies to current events is I saw, um, happened to be um, working the day that they had a CJD person as a patient. So, and me, I like to read up on it, and it said it takes 10 to 20 years to manifest. And you could see the other associated illnesses with this. And they said the guy contracted it because he was a lab worker. Uh, and 20 years later, he comes up. And I tell you what, he was shaken so bad, I thought he would lift off the bed. I mean, it was violent. If you think, just a little tremor is bad, this was pretty frightening type illness. And now they're talking about it again, that it could happen overnight. Interesting, isn't it? I just want to touch a little bit again on MAYO is supposed to be neutral. And this is a little bit of, anecdotal, what I heard as gossip growing up, and I cannot substantiate it. But as far, earlier years, like say 40s, 1940s, that time range, Rochester supposedly was designated uh, as a neutral territory for the mafia. The gangsters. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. And also that, and I'm going to show a little symbolism here and give you a clue of what they thought that the Mayo brothers were all about. When you look in the buildings, it sure could pass the test. And I just want to point out architecturally, it's just magnificent. This gargoyle is on what they call the Plumber Building. It's still a working Carillon bell tower. They play music. And architecturally, they had these massively huge doors and a lot of brick. And this is going to come into play here in a little bit. But I think it was done to be ornate. I do not think these are old buildings. Um, but you can think what you may. But the newer stuff is just, it's really nice architecture and workmanship, but it is shoddy compared to the old. Okay, I'll keep moving along here. Okay, one last thought on my love-hate relationship with the whole medical industrial complex is uh, when I worked there, I recognized it was a place to stay away from, and I did until I couldn't anymore. In the last decade, I've had 3 life-saving surgeries, 2 on an emergency basis, and I'm very dependent to stay alive with the medicine. So that's part of my love-hate. And part of my hate is all the lousy doctors I met on this journey. If you catch my drift, when they're good, they're really good. And it really makes me reflect about God's intervention keeping me going as long as He has. His fingerprints are all over it. Um, and nothing like being alive at a time such as this. He's kept me going.